today's lesson will more than likely focus on something you're intimately familiar with, paragraphs, but the real meat and potatoes of today's lesson is a concept you might not be so familiar with called idea chunks. So we've studied sentences already, right? So words and sentences convey or carry the message that we want to transmit. But once we put those together into paragraphs and those paragraphs together into idea chunks, and those idea chunks combine into an essay, and that essay proves a thesis, you can see how we're starting to scale up here. Okay, so we've tackled sentences, and now we're going to tackle paragraphs and something that might not be as familiar to you in idea chunks. And of course, I want to start with a bit of a disclaimer. And I've probably mentioned this in the past, but I think it's really, really important because I don't want you to leave this lesson thinking that as long as you accomplish A, B, and C, your writing is clear, it's good, it's coherent, it's succinct. Writing is not a formula, okay? Anything that's a formula is like a science. It's an algorithm. It's a function. You can put the same things into it every time. It's replicable, and you can rely on it for a consistent output. Writing's not like that. Every situation, every writing situation, every rhetorical situation is nuanced and different. And you have to modulate the skills that you learn to meet those demands of any particular situation. Right? So what I'm teaching you today might look like a formula, right? Hey, if I do my topic sentence, my claim, my evidence, my explication, and I transition, I'm good, right? One sentence for each, I'm good. I'm on to the next paragraph. Check that box. I'm out. That's not the case, okay? And I definitely don't want you to think that. What I'm presenting here today is a heuristic. It's a tool. It's not a hard and fast rule for you to use like an algorithm. All right, so really what we're getting after today is a strategy that can aid you in transmitting information or mood or feeling to your audience. And really what we're talking about is meeting audience expectation. As a burgeoning academic writer, you're going to begin to notice that your audience expects a number of things in an argument or in a piece of writing. Okay, what I'm going to go over today is how to put those pieces together into paragraphs, how to put those paragraphs together into idea chunks, and how to order those so that they make coherent, logical sense and help your reader understand what it is that you're arguing. Okay, but of course, this isn't the only way to do things. Once you learn these skills and master them, you can transmute them and do what you need to meet the demands of a particular writing situation. Okay, so let's imagine that you've been assigned an essay. And in the past, you've more than likely learned how to write like a 5-paragraph theme. I see a lot of senior seminars in high school now focusing on extended arguments, which is great. But let's think back to maybe 8th or 9th grade where you were learning your 5-paragraph essay. And in those lessons, you learned that you need an introduction, then you have your 3 supporting points, then you have a conclusion, and you're out. I think that for many of us, this lesson was so ingrained and burned into our psyche that it's hard to think about an idea outside of a paragraph, right? And so sometimes I'll get, well, more than sometimes, I'll get essays that have paragraphs that are nearly 2 pages long because we've been taught that an idea that we're trying to write about needs to be put into 1 paragraph, and that's not the case. Okay, so essays move from idea to idea. Yes, you're trying to prove or show or argue for a specific larger thesis, but usually that thesis relies on smaller arguments to be made along the way. So I don't want you to think of those smaller arguments or those ideas as paragraphs. I want you to start thinking of them as idea chunks. Okay, and then those chunks can be further divided into paragraphs that accomplish the different things that an idea chunk needs to accomplish. Okay, if this is all very abstract, let me just bring up this, simple little outline. So, like I said, you're going to argue for this thesis here. This is your main goal. This is the objective. But to successfully argue this one thing, you need to first argue these three supporting things which help prove this, right? So these are further evidence, if you want to think about it like that, for the larger argument. Okay, so let's say my first idea chunk here is rather simple. I only need 2 paragraphs to explain this idea chunk. But as I transition into my second idea chunk, it's a little bit more complex. It's a little more complicated. And it needs 3 paragraphs. And then as I transition into my third idea chunk, it's maybe a little more simple again, so only 2 paragraphs are needed. Okay? So hopefully this can help you visualize how each idea doesn't need to be crammed into one massive paragraph, that you can deal with an idea in multiple paragraphs as long as you're meeting the expectations of your reader, and that's what I'm going to get to next. All right, so here are the 5 elements that are needed in an idea chunk, and I just want to take each one at a time and talk about them for just a moment. Okay, so you've probably heard about topic sentences before. Here I've used the singular noun sentence, but I do want to say that, sometimes, especially if you're doing a longer essay, if you're trying to introduce an idea that's quite complicated, you might need more than one sentence to let your reader know what the main idea of that idea chunk will be. Okay, so the topic sentence, think about it as a way to broadcast or forecast for your reader so that they have an expectation of what they're getting into, right? It's really a courtesy. You're letting them know what's coming, okay? And then after that, you're going to make a claim. Now, sometimes your claim is embedded in your topic sentence, sometimes, but usually this is your opportunity to really lay out the argument that's going to be made here. Once you make the claim, of course, you have to provide evidence for it. Okay, so how can you tell your reader that the claim that you're making is true, that what you're saying is right? So you provide some evidence. The biggest mistake I usually see writers make is dropping it right there. This is called the curse of knowledge. You're so close to this idea. You're so intimately involved with researching this that it seems self-evident to you, right? I've made the claim. Here's the evidence. I'm out, next paragraph, boom. And it's really, that's not the case most of the time. Think about your reader. Do they really know as much about this as you do? Is it really that evident how the evidence connects to the claim? So the next part of the idea chunk is called explication, or you're connecting the evidence to the claim. So you take a moment here to explain how the evidence is not self-proving, but how your reader can understand how the evidence supports the claim. Okay, and then there's a transition. Okay, so these are the objectives or the different elements, if you will, of an idea chunk. Okay, so what I don't want you to leave here thinking, though, is that this is one sentence for the topic sentence, one sentence for the claim, one sentence of evidence, one sentence of explication, and then I transition and I'm out, right? No. You write as many sentences as you need to get these ideas across, to successfully accomplish the explication, for example. Okay, so here's another simple little outline that might help you conceptualize this. All right, so I'm writing this essay. I have this thesis that I'm arguing, and here's my first idea chunk. So my first paragraph, I'm going to lay out the topic sentence. Here's what this idea chunk is going to be about. And then I'm dealing with maybe a complicated claim here, and I have to bring in some context, maybe a little bit of information, background building. So maybe that takes me 3 to 4 sentences to lay out my claim. Okay, so the claim there and the topic sentence are all in one paragraph. Okay, and then I move on to my next paragraph to accomplish the other parts of the idea chunk. Here I'm repeating the topic sentence. right? So this paragraph is going to be about introducing evidence and then explaining that evidence and how it connects to the claim. So there might need to be a topic sentence again at the beginning of this paragraph to explain how this paragraph will work. Okay, so then I introduce maybe 2 or 3 sentences the evidence, maybe more than that, and then I explain how that evidence supports that claim. So you're probably, if you've been paying attention, noticing that there's something missing, right? I don't have a transition here, and you're right. So the reason I did this is because you can have a transition at the end of a paragraph, or you can put that transition as part of the topic sentence of the next idea chunk, okay? Or maybe you're doing both. That might be a little overkill, but maybe you're getting creative and maybe you found a way to transition and then, have a little bit more of a transition in the second idea chunk. Okay, so if you think back, remember when we were talking about complex sentences? Complex sentences are really helpful in combining topic sentences and transitions. Okay, because you can have one part of it, the dependent clause perhaps is the transition, which refers back to what you're coming from, and then connects it to, in the independent clause, perhaps, the topic sentence for this next idea chunk. So the transition is difficult, but it's important. I have a separate lesson on transition, so I don't want to belabor that point here, but we'll talk about that more in the future. So either here or here, you transition into your next idea chunk. All right, let's take a look at idea chunk number 2. All right, so in paragraph number 1, it's very similar to the paragraph number 1 up here. I have a topic sentence. I have a claim here. And in this claim, maybe I need to differentiate between the claim I'm making here and the claim I'm making here. Maybe it's a brand new claim that doesn't need differentiation. Right, so this is what I mean by it's not a formula. Right? Each one requires a different approach, but regardless, you're still making a claim. All right, so then I get down to paragraph 2. I need to provide some evidence. I need to explain that evidence. Okay, and then down here, paragraph 3, maybe I have a really complicated transition. Maybe the next idea chunk is hard to connect between these two, right? As I'm leaving idea chunk number 2 and I'm going into idea chunk number 3, they're very disparate. They're different things, and maybe it'll take me a paragraph to explain how they're related, right? So sort of ease the reader into this next section. Okay, so maybe I need a whole paragraph. Maybe I need 5 sentences to transition into the next idea. Okay, you can see how these can all be moved around. Maybe I need 2 paragraphs of evidence and then a paragraph of an explanation for those 2 paragraphs and their evidence and how they connect to the claim, right? It's up to you. It's what you need to accomplish the task. There's no hard and fast rule, okay? So I want to provide you with an example now that I wrote. Okay, so in this example, I have color-coded the different elements of the idea chunk that I'm working with so that you can better track them. So in the red, I'm making a claim, and I've sort of combined the claim with the topic sentence. The blue is the evidence, and the green is the explication. I've left out the transition at the end because I have a different video lesson on transition, so I don't want to belabor that. Okay, so this example is maybe a little bit different. It's more of like a personal essay style. We'll have plenty of time in the future to pick apart other examples and see how they work with the different elements of an idea chunk. But I think this is a decent intro. All right, so let's take the first little section here in the red. So this is the topic sentence and the claim, and then after I read it, I'll stop. In the South, many have romanticized the Civil War, which in no small part has contributed to the modern misrepresentation of the Confederate flag as a vestige of heritage rather than a symbol of hate. Being a Southerner myself, I can testify to the whitewashed history we in that part of the world tell ourselves, our children, and our children's children. All right, so let's pause right there. Let's pick this apart a little bit. Let's pull it apart and see what's going on. Okay, so let's take the first sentence. In the South, many have romanticized the Civil War. Okay, so there's a claim right there. It's embedded in the topic sentence. So I'm talking about a specific geographical place. I'm talking about a specific phenomenon, romanticizing the Civil War, like making it out to be this great lost cause that was full of valiant young fighting men. And then I'm also making another claim, not only that we romanticize the Civil War in the South, but this also contributes to a misrepresentation of the Confederate flag as something that it's not. So if you're not from the South, or if you've never been to the South, this is true, right? People romanticize the Civil War, and they treat the Confederate flag as only a symbol of history, rather than how it's been used throughout history as something that symbolizes hate. Okay, so there I have a topic sentence, and I have a two-part claim. We romanticize the Civil War, and this contributes to hate. Okay, and then I sort of do some ethos building here. I say, being a Southerner myself, I can testify to the whitewashed history. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting up the type of evidence that I'm going to provide, right? It's going to be a personal testimony. And in this personal testimony, I'm letting my reader know that I'm going to present evidence about how we whitewash history. And not only do we whitewash it, but we sort of lie to ourselves and our children and our children's children, and it just keeps perpetuating down throughout genealogical lines, right? All right, so that's the first section. I have a topic sentence, claim, and then further refinement of that claim to set up the evidence that I'm going to provide. Okay, so let's now look at the evidence section. And like I said, this is going to be more of a personal testimony, personal story, personal narrative. Okay, all right. It isn't uncommon, for example, when traveling the cracked, crooked back roads of Georgia, to stumble upon a little curio shop. Of course, they advertise themselves as a bookstore/coffee shop, but it doesn't take long to realize that their idea of a bookstore means hawking Confederate paraphernalia. Rusty belt buckles and bayonets, smashed Civil War iron bullets, and tattered uniforms sit in freshly dusted display cases, completely detached from their historical context. All right, so let's stop right there. I'm setting up an example of, hey, you're driving around in the South, you're in Georgia, you come across a quote-unquote bookstore coffee shop. This isn't uncommon. This is true story. So you go in there and they have these. It's not a bookstore or coffee shop. It's really almost like a little museum. In their display cases they have Confederate paraphernalia. Okay, so this is the evidence that I'm providing. It's not uncommon to see this type of store, and in this type of store they are romanticizing the past by selling and celebrating this paraphernalia. And then I provide further evidence of what that looks like. I say, rusty belt buckles, bayonets, right? So I'm trying to be really evocative here and paint a picture, right? So rusty belt buckles, it shows time. It shows something very, very simple that we idolize in the South. Bayonets, right? Something meant to kill. Smashed Civil War iron bullets, right? That have been used to kill people. Tattered uniforms, right? So things that have seen battle. And I'm saying they all sit in these freshly dusted display cases, something that's treated as if it's this romantic piece of history, something that should be idolized. Right, so that's my evidence. I've set up a store and then sort of painted the description of what that store looks like. Now, this isn't enough, right? That evidence doesn't prove anything. I'm making the claim that we romanticize the Civil War, and that is dangerous because it sterilizes a very, very violent and racist past. Okay, so the green part is the explication. But this isn't just a museum of sorts. It's an education center for the vulnerable. Unaware of the blood and slavery stitched into the fabric of those uniforms, a chubby kid with buzzed hair and an ice cream cone follows his father around the shop. No one lectures him about his heritage. The shop owner doesn't tell him about the honor of the quote-unquote lost cause or what the flag represents. They don't have to. The glass cases and pedestals tell the kid what he needs to know. But the artifacts, carefully lit from below in their plexiglass cases, don't tell the whole story. The shame is conspicuously absent, and only one voice speaks from the past. Okay, so how am I explaining this? It's probably not obvious to my reader how the store that I've painted a picture of proves my claim, right? So what I'm saying is, look, this isn't just a museum. This is the way that people are passively taught about the past, right? So I've presented sort of another little scenario where there's this kid walking around following his dad through this store. You know, he's got his ice cream cone, he's buzzed hair. I'm trying to paint this symbol of innocence, right? This vulnerable child. And as he's walking around, no one's telling him that he should romanticize the past. No one's saying, you know, this is this great glorious battle that these brave young men fought for states' rights. My argument is they don't have to, right? Just the presentation of these things as innocuous pieces of the past, harmless pieces of the past, teach that to him, right? So they don't have to tell him these things. The way that they treat the objects teach him these things, right? The glass cases and pedestals tell the kid what he needs to know, okay? But the artifacts, carefully lit from below in their plexiglass cases, don't tell the whole story, okay? So I've personified these cases. I'm saying they're the things doing the teaching. And then I end with that's the only voice, and that there's no fuller picture of the history. There's no shame accompanying these objects because they're treated, like religious artifacts almost. Okay, so the explication there, I hope, does a better job of showing how the evidence speaks to the claim. Okay, one thing, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but one thing I do want to encourage you to do is, have fun with writing. This is not, if this were an essay, this is not a creative writing assignment, but I've used strategies from narrative storytelling. I've used really what I think is evocative language. I've tried to show what this looks like rather than just say that it happens. I've tried to paint a picture. I've tried to link certain things together when I'm talking about tattered uniforms. And then down here I talk about slavery being stitched into the fabric of those uniforms, right? That's it's a metaphor. So just because what you're doing is academic writing doesn't mean it has to be dull. You can be evocative. You can paint pictures. You can use language to its full force. Okay? So hopefully that is a helpful example. I've sort of told you have to start with the topic sentence, and then the claim, then evidence, then explication. What I really want you to see is that those are just different pieces that need to be in there. Those are different elements. What would happen, for example, if you started with the evidence? What if you zoomed in on the evidence and you told the story of the evidence? Or what if you started with your study or your statistic and then you zoom out from that evidence and talk about how that microcosm that you were just investigating is part of a larger argument, right? So this is the claim that you can extrapolate from that evidence. So in this, though, the evidence that you're presenting would probably need a little bit of a topic sentence, something to ease your reader in. And then you're sort of extrapolating from this evidence a claim, and then you explain, right? This is the explanation or the explication of how that evidence proves the claim, and then you can transition with multiple sentences. Okay, so it's not a formula. It's not an algorithm. It's not checking boxes. You can move things around. You can play with them. You can revise them to see how they work for you. What I really want you to leave this lesson with is knowing that you have these different parts in an idea chunk, that idea chunks work with different paragraphs to get across a main idea, and then each idea chunk is is placed within a larger essay to accomplish a goal. Okay. Hopefully this has been helpful for you. If you have more questions, as always, email me, talk to me after class, talk to me during class. We'll have plenty of time to discuss these concepts.